I think there's quite a strong lean towards competitiveness in this industry because there's so many of us trying to achieve the same things. But actually, the more we raise up other people and the more we work alongside each other, the better it is for wildlife and probably for yourself.
Hello, and welcome to the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I'm Angela Nicholson, and I'm the founder of SheClicks, which is a community for female photographers. In these podcasts, I talk with women in the photographic industry to hear about their experiences, what drives them, and how they got to where they are now. This episode is with Lara Jackson, a conservation biologist, award-winning wildlife photographer, Nikon Creator, and an ambassador for Save the Rhino. Her work has taken her across the globe, combining cutting-edge research with photography to highlight the plight of endangered species. Hi Lara, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for joining me. Now, I know your first passion was nature and wildlife, but at what point did you become interested in photography?
Yeah, so for me, I like to say that I fell into photography completely by accident. So first and foremost, I'm a conservation biologist and zoologist. And as part of my university studies, I had amazing opportunities to go to some incredible places as part of my research. So it was actually a trip to Madagascar, and I was there for 6 weeks researching mouse lemurs for my undergraduate dissertation, and I went equipped only with a GoPro and obviously came away with no photos that I liked because you can't really capture wildlife imagery with a GoPro. So it was after that trip that I decided to buy a camera, and I bought a bridge camera because I distinctly remember thinking, well, I don't want to get into that cycle of buying expensive lenses. Obviously that changed quite quickly, but it was from that moment on that I really became interested in photography. And I had another opportunity, a tropical ecology field trip to Belize in my next year, where I took my camera and I just absolutely fell in love with photography. So that's where it really began.
So what was it about photography that really hooked you? And at what point did you realise it was going to be a key part of your career?
I think, well, I assume it's the same for many of us. It's just that chasing that perfection of that image. When I was in Belize, we had scarlet macaws that would just fly in the trees above our camp. And I just became obsessed with trying to get a better and better image, just for me personally. You know, I was really intrigued by their behaviours and I wanted to capture them in flight and capture them bickering amongst each other. So I think it was that, maybe the pursuit of perfection. I've always been a bit of a perfectionist anyway. So that's probably what really intrigued me. And I think having my background in conservation and, you know, studying zoology at uni, I probably had more of an understanding of behaviour, especially for some of the subjects, than someone who might just be starting out photography and then learning about the animal afterwards. So I felt like I could predict certain moments maybe, but it wasn't until the pandemic where I realised that photography would become a bigger part of my career. I was really in the research side of things and then just using my photography on the side to raise awareness for wildlife.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really useful tool for communication, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think with conservation, with the state of the planet as it is at the moment, it's really difficult to get messaging out there, and it's also really difficult to get that balance. I think people, if they see overwhelmingly negative stories surrounding the planet and the plight of wildlife, I think it can be easy to feel quite down and to not really know what to do and to feel quite helpless. So trying to get the balance right and communicating both positive stories as well is really important.
Yeah. If you see a photograph of a fluffy panda cub, you automatically want to do something to protect them, or, you know, you're intrigued. But how do you go about something like, you know, a naked mole rat or something like that? You know, something that's just only its mother could love it.
Well, I've never photographed a naked mole rat before, but I think it's trying to find something that we as humans can relate to. That's why I'm really obsessed with rhinos, and I'm really passionate about raising awareness for the plight of rhinos, because I think they're harder to relate to. You have things like the elephant, where they almost respond in a human-like manner. They've got human-like emotions. So it's easy for us to anthropomorphize those behaviors and think, oh, they're just like us, like we must protect them. For animals like the rhino, like the naked mole rat, it is more difficult. So I think it's finding stories and finding quirks which are either just funny or intriguing or, that we can relate to. And I think that's sort of the key to crack those species and make them a bit more lovable to the general public.
How did you first get involved with Save the Rhino and working with them?
So I researched black rhinos for my master's thesis. And I worked in Labour Wildlife Conservancy in Kenya while I was doing that. And once I'd completed my master's, I actually got invited back to the reserve to repeat my study, but in the dry season, because my original study had been in the wet season, and they wanted a holistic data set. And it was on that second trip that I met a representative from Save the Rhino. And obviously I was aware of their work anyway. I really admired everything that they did on the ground and all the conservation efforts. So I just got chatting with them. And we just created a relationship. And I think it was at the start of the pandemic, and I just said to them, you don't have any ambassadors as a charity, and lots of other charities have ambassadors, and I'd really like to be that role for you. So it didn't happen for another year and a half, but eventually, I was announced as an ambassador, and I just am so grateful and will do everything in my power to keep amplifying their voice.
I think that's great that it wasn't just that you asked them if you could be one, you pointed out they didn't have any and they really should.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I guess it's a role which is quite important. For me, I use my socials to sort of help share any fundraising events that they're doing and spread any communications that they want people to be aware of. So, yeah.
Are you involved with a lot of their programs? Do you go out and photograph them?
I would absolutely love to, and it's something that I keep pushing for. But obviously with charities, their budgets are tied up in various different things. So I know that they don't have a specific budget set aside for things like that. So it's something that I am saving up to hopefully go and do for them at some point. But they have incredible charities, like so many things, so many varied things. Like they have life insurance policies for rangers, because obviously it can be a dangerous job out there. They provide boots, food, meals. It's not just things like funding dehorning projects. It's so far beyond that. So they do amazing work, and it's not just the African species they focus on, it's also the Asian species too.
Yeah, it takes a lot. Even if you are just dehorning a rhino, it takes a lot to get there and know how to do it and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of training involved, I should think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so many different teams. You've also got aerial support and helicopters and pilots, and you've got veterinary teams, rangers, all the teams on the ground. So it really is a lot to mobilise and organise. And obviously none of that is cheap. So I totally appreciate that all of the funding is funneled into those more important things.
Yeah. Now, you've been involved with projects that are trying to reduce the impact of tourists on wildlife. How do you tackle the photographing wildlife and the role of photography in documenting wildlife with the sort of need to try and stop lots of people going to remote locations and disturbing the wildlife?
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky one, and that's a problem that's become quite pronounced this year. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos from the Great Migration in Kenya and Tanzania, where you have lots of tourists out of the vehicle and actually blocking the routes of the wildebeest as they're trying to cross. It's really difficult because obviously we want more and more people to care about nature, because if they care, hopefully they're going to make small changes in their lives, but also advocate for those species, and hopefully it will help to protect them as we move forward. If it's unregulated, if tourism is unmanaged, then we can end up in situations like that. So I think it's really about putting the emphasis on us for now, in making sure that we do our research, and we're only supporting camps or conservancies that are really supporting conservation projects, and they're not putting pressure on the wildlife. And you can even have that in the Mara. There's quite a few private conservancies that surround the Masai Mara Greater Reserve, where they have really strict rules with the number of vehicles per sighting, for example. So I've visited Naboisha Conservancy quite a few times, and I think they only allow 5 cars per sighting, and everyone is really good at following those rules. So it really is about doing your research, making sure you're supporting ethical companies. And also, if you're in a situation where you feel like your guide is perhaps being a bit unethical, to actually put your foot down and say, no, we want to leave. And I've had to do that in the past. And my guide was super ethical, but we were following 5 male cheetahs in a coalition. They don't exist anymore. But this was in the Masai Mara, and there were just so many vehicles effectively chasing them. And we just said, nope, we're going to leave. And I think it's accepting that you might miss a photographic opportunity, but it really doesn't matter, because the welfare of the animal always comes first.
Yes. I suppose a similar analogy is, you've got to walk the walk. And in the UK, we sometimes see photographs of people who appear to be, say, sitting in bluebells or sitting on bluebells. And it's good if the photographer says, they were sitting on a log next to the bluebells, or I've taken an angle and they're actually on a footpath, to make people aware that they haven't just disregarded any sort of wildlife requirements.
Yeah, I think that we should all be held accountable for our actions. And by explaining what we're doing, then hopefully it will not encourage others to perhaps do something that they perceive as, per your example, if they thought you were sitting on bluebells, they might try and replicate the photo. But actually, if you just said, yeah, please note, I sat on a log, that's really important because we don't want to propagate bad behavior.
Yeah. So how do people approach you these days for work? Do they primarily come to you for photography, or is it for your research work?
So at the moment, I'm not doing any active research. Predominantly, it's all photography and science communication. But I would say it's probably still mostly me approaching companies and organizations. Maybe I get approached 5% of the time, and the other 95% is me reaching out and saying, hey, like I've noticed this research project going on, or like I noticed that you support this. I'd really love to go and document it. And obviously, I still sometimes don't get any email replies. I still sometimes get no. The worst is getting a yes and then having months of communication and then getting ghosted. But yeah, like it's a give and take. And I think people don't appreciate that there's still a lot of hard work behind the desk that goes on.
Yeah. Do you find that aspect stressful? If you have a bit of a lean period and then suddenly, you have to chase people down, or sometimes, suddenly 3 leads come in at once and you just kind of work out how to fit that in.
Yeah, I think it's the joys of being self-employed. Sometimes you have months where you're incredibly busy and then you don't have time to actually line up work for the next few months. And then suddenly you're in those few months and there's not really an awful lot going on. So I guess it's just about being mindful and responsible with your income and making sure that you have enough put aside to help support yourself over those fallow months, as it were.
Yeah. You have quite a few strands to your business because, you're not doing that much research anymore, but you've got your photography, you run workshops, you've written a children's book. How do you balance all those strands while, feeling comfortable, bringing more work in and not feeling overwhelmed?
I think I've always been quite organised and quite good at multitasking. And that's probably the most important thing that prevents me getting stressed. My husband and I got married last year and I organised our wedding in 3 months because I had some downtime and I was like, right, I'm just going to get it all done. So I know that when I set my mind to something, I can do it. But it is stressful, and especially with the economy going up and down, sometimes that money doesn't trickle down to marketing teams, which obviously affects then the work that I can do or the budgets that they have. And I think with social media, sometimes the role and the impact of photography is really underestimated. And I think people don't put the same sort of monetary value, or they don't ascribe the same monetary value to photography that they should. So trying to sort of say, well, actually, my work is worth this much can be difficult because they might say, well, there's lots of other people doing it on social media and they might give their image to me for free. So that's difficult and something that's you're always having to navigate being self-employed.
Yeah, that is a tricky thing. I mean, sometimes you are, though, just competing against someone with a smartphone. And whilst they might get a great smartphone shot, it's not going to stand up to what you might produce.
Yeah, I agree. I think smartphones are amazing and certainly have their place, especially now that Instagram, for example, is very heavily focused on reels. I see quite a few of my friends who are in the fitness space and they do really well because their content can just be shot on an iPhone and uploaded. Whereas for me, it wouldn't quite have the same impact if I did that. So there's certainly a lot more effort that goes into creating content on my side, I feel, than, or like not necessarily effort because my friends work incredibly hard too. But I guess there's just more gear involved. A video of me filming an otter on my phone wouldn't quite have the same impact as me filming it with my Z9, for example.
Yeah, quite a different thing. And people have different expectations of someone who's talking about photography, what they are actually going to put out on social media. Do you feel under pressure to put out content on a frequent basis?
I think that I did when I first started out. Arguably, I could still do more. I think that I am not a huge fan of reels, and I definitely felt at first when they came out that I had to meet that trend and do the same thing. But I think staying true to me and my passions and what I believe in, and I love imagery. Like I still think imagery is the most powerful thing. So it's a case of using that in carousels, which I need to get better at doing more often. But certainly there is pressure, especially with the algorithm, and because some brands or companies will only work with you if you have a certain level of engagement. So that does introduce pressure, but I like to think that I I don't bend to that, and I try to just continue on being me.
It is remarkable how powerful the trend towards Reels and TikTok and everything has become, because I mean, not only have we sort of felt pressure to start producing that type of content, everybody's flipping their cameras around.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? And I'm not going to lie, I did think it would sort of be over by now, because I don't know if you remember, a long time ago there was Vine, and Vine was quite similar in terms of videos that you made, and see that ended up being shut down. So I didn't think that it would be as prolonged as it has been, but obviously it looks like it's here to stay now. So I think it's about using Reels in a way that works for you. And I'm not hugely comfortable in turning the camera around onto me all the time. And I'll do it if I need to, but I'd prefer that the focus wasn't on me. I'd prefer it to be on my work. So I think going forward for me, in the way that I use Reels, it would be just focusing on footage and clips of the wildlife and finding a way to make that exciting for people.
Great. Please excuse this interruption. This episode is brought to you by Seawe, Europe's leading photo printing company, and their hero product, the Seawe Photo Book, that is the proud recipient of the Which Best Buy Award. You know those thousands of photos sitting on your phone or hard drive? With a Seawe Photo Book, you can turn your memories into a beautiful, high-quality album that you'll want to show off. Every page is fully customisable, and you can pick from a range of sizes, finishes and layouts, designing every detail with their easy-to-use editor or let their smart assistant help. So if you're ready to do something real with your photos, head over to seawe.co.uk. That's cewe.co.uk. Okay, let's get back to the show. Now, your image of a lioness with blood dripping from her face was highly commended in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. I think it was 2021.
Yes.
And it is a stunning image, but it's also quite hard to look at in some respects. It's not one you want to think about too hard sometimes. Has that been received differently by how was it received?
I think generally it was received overwhelmingly positively.
Good.
And in fact, in the display, it was actually the first image that you saw when you walked around the corner, which I think was really bold. I thought the organisers would sort of hide it in the back because it can be quite a polarising image. But at the end of the day, that's nature, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's brutal, it's messy, and yeah, it is a hard image to look at. It was even harder to watch in person because fortunately she started eating the wildebeest while it was still alive, so that was terrible.
Yeah.
And actually that's where having a camera in your hands helps, because it kind of separates you from what you're seeing. And obviously being a scientist, there was a part of me that was like, oh, this is horrendous, and the other part was like, wow, this is really cool. Now I'll do this again. So yeah, I think overwhelmingly positively, although there was one time where I was at the exhibition with my family, and so obviously like you overhear people talking, and there was one lady who was like, oh, that's disgusting, move away, I can't see it. I totally respect that. It isn't easy to look at, but yeah, as I mentioned, it's nature.
Those eyes though, you wouldn't get away from those eyes very easily because they were boring into you.
Yeah, straight down the lens. She was very fierce.
A very real shot, I think. It shows wildlife as it really is, not a sanitized version.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's not necessarily a trend, but it's easy to sort of Disneyfy nature and make all those interactions and relationships pretty and pristine. But the reality is that it's not.
Do you enter many photographic competitions?
I do, on and off. I think photography competitions are really interesting. And I think actually the best thing about them is that they help you to pick out your best work, to be honest with you. But for example, that image was highly commended in that competition, but I also entered that image into several other photography competitions and it didn't get any awards. So I think it's important for everyone to remember that those competitions are highly subjective. So don't feel too disheartened if your images aren't awarded. But I do think it's still worth doing, because being able to objectively look at your own work and say, yeah, that image is perhaps award worthy, could get through, I'll enter it, is a really important skill to have.
I was going to ask you what your advice would be for anyone contemplating entering a competition. And it sounds like actually your advice, I'm putting words in your mouth now, would be to not see it as an opportunity to win something, but as an opportunity to learn. Would that be fairly accurate?
Definitely, I think so. And I think the more that you're looking at your own work and perhaps looking at other people's and trying to figure out if have you got something unique, it's only going to open your own eyes to different techniques that perhaps you haven't tried or different compositions that you didn't think about. So I think never underestimate the opportunity to learn, and being able to critically look at your own work is one of the best ways that you can start doing that.
Do you ever shoot with a competition in mind, or is it something you do retrospectively? You go back and you look through your images to find something appropriate?
I never shoot with competitions in mind, but I also haven't had many opportunities to sort of sit out and plan the dream photo. I've always been quite a reactive photographer, and I think that comes down to how I started out. When I was out doing my research, if I saw something, I'd have to beg my research partner to stop the car so I could take a photo. And he'd say, yeah, you've got like 1 minute and then we've got to go and find the black rhinos. So I never really had that time to sort of think about what could be an incredible shot and to stay and wait. It's something that I'm starting to do a lot more now that I have a son and I've got a lot of time in one place. I can sort of think about, for example, I live on the Isle of Mull. I can think about a puffin photo that I really want, and next year I might try out and go and get that. But yeah, I've never really had the luxury of that. So I've never shot with competitions in mind, and it's definitely been something that I've looked at my images in an ad hoc basis and thought, yeah, that works for that category and that could be interesting there.
Have there been any instances, for example, maybe with that lion photograph, where you've thought, oh, actually, this is a shot as you took it that I could enter into a competition?
Yeah, there's definitely been a couple of times where I've had that feeling of this is quite special. And actually the bloody lioness was the first time that happened. And the second time was this male lion. And we were with him in the Masai Mara, but off peak. So it was lovely and quiet, actually. And there was a stunning sunrise and he was backlit and it was absolutely beautiful. His mane was like orange. And then I looked up and there were 2 hot air balloons sort of drifting past. And I sort of zoomed out as they went in front of the sun and took a picture. And I felt that, oh, this is really quite special. But I've entered that in multiple competitions and it's never been shortlisted. So I think it's important there to also note that although work to you feels special, it might not make it in a competition, and that's fine. Like, it doesn't make me love that image any less just because it hasn't gone on to win any awards or be shortlisted in any competitions.
Do you ever print any of your work and put it on the wall so you at least can look at the stuff that you really like?
I have printed out a lot of my work. I sell prints, so I sort of print them out and make sure that I'm happy with them. And the only one I have on my wall is that lion with the 2 balloons, actually. But both my husband and I are wildlife photographers, so I think if we put all of our favourite images up, there wouldn't be much space left on the walls.
And then there'd be some sort of survey as to who's got more pictures than the other. All right, well, I think that's a really good time to go to 6 from SheClicks. I've got 10 questions from SheClickers and I'd like you to answer 6 questions, please, by picking numbers from 1 to 10. So if you could give me your first number, please.
Let's go 1.
If you only had one species you could photograph from now until forever, what would it be and why? That question's from Sarah.
That's a really good question and pretty difficult to answer, actually, because I have quite a few species that I absolutely love. But I think my absolute passion lies in trying to raise awareness for rhinos and the fact that they're still heavily poached. So it would probably have to be rhinos, specifically black rhinos, because that's what I specialised in. And I just think they're really underestimated, undervalued. They're underloved. I would want to use my time to sort of create imagery that would help people fall in love with them as much as I have.
Well, lovely. Okay. Could I have your second number, please?
Let's go 3.
What are your tips for capturing wildlife in the UK when the quality of light is so often poor? That question's from Andrea.
I think that's also a great question. I have just mentioned I live on the Isle of Mull, so we have even worse light than probably all of the rest of you. Right now it's absolutely pouring down and we didn't have a summer. It was dreadful up here. So I think my best tip is to work with the light. I think it's a common misconception that you need golden light to create stunning imagery. And of course, in some situations that helps, but actually working with moodiness and using it to your advantage can be really powerful. It can open up new techniques to you, things like high key photography, which can create really unique shots. That's especially useful here when I'm photographing the seabird breeding season and we've got a really misty, foggy day, or it's just quite white and washed out, then high key photography is perfect for that. So I think don't see the weather as a disadvantage, but actually use it to your advantage, and you'll probably create imagery that someone else might not have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you don't get a problem with harsh highlights and deep shadows if it's permanently overcast.
Not very often. But I do think the magic comes out in the wild weather. And with otter photography, I think some of my favourite photos have been taken in pretty stormy, horrendous conditions.
Okay. Could I have your third number, please?
Number 4.
Could you share a memorable experience for one of your wildlife photography trips that's left a lasting impression on you? That question is from Anne.
It's got to be this time in Kenya when I was researching black rhinos and we couldn't find any black rhinos that morning. So my research partner and I drove to the top of this hill, and there was this really large plateaued area at the top. It was probably 150 meters across, and there were three white rhinos grazing at the top. And we both got out of the car. My research partner was using binoculars to see if we could find a black rhino, and I just sat next to the car with my camera and I was taking a photo of the white rhinos. And it was so peaceful, so relaxing. And obviously I had a zoom lens on. So I think at the time I had a 150 to 600 mil on. And I was completely lost in the moment. And I didn't realize that the rhinos had wandered really quite close. And I heard a sort of huff and I looked up and there was a bull white rhino about 5 meters away from me.
Oh, wow.
So I stayed completely still. I put my camera down and I just stared him in the eyes. And he was probably looking at me for about 5 seconds and then let out a huff and walked away. So that was one of the most awe-inspiring encounters I've ever had. It's worth noting that my research partner was watching the entire time. He's Kenyan and grew up around rhinos. He was monitoring behavior and he would have told me before I got to that point if he thought I was in any danger. But yeah, luckily it was a very relaxed rhino, and sharing that moment was, awe-inspiring.
When a rhino is 5 meters from you and somebody did say you're now in danger, what do you do? Apart from try not to panic.
Yeah, I think I obviously would have been told way before that point. So I would have had time to move out the way. And I was also right next to the car. So it would have been a case of just jumping up and moving around the car.
Righto.
To provide a little barrier. But yeah, it was incredible.
Shades of Jurassic Park, I thought. All right. Could I have your fourth number, please?
Number 6.
Do you have any advice for getting noticed as a photographer? That question is from Philippa.
I think stay true to you and what you find interesting, and also just develop your style a bit. Look at other photographers, look at what inspires you, try out techniques that they're using, but ultimately just keep uploading work that you like and you feel represents you. And then I guess just start reaching out to brands, but make sure that you don't reach out and just say, hey, I'd love to work with you, because I can guarantee they get 1,000 messages like that every day. And perhaps do some research and see if there are any projects that you want to go and document or support, and say, hey, I see that you're doing this. I'd really love to go and do that for you. And that's probably the best way to start getting yourself out there. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but social media is incredibly important just for getting your name out and about. And yeah, it kind of acts a bit like those competitions we were talking about earlier, being able to look at your work critically and decide which you want to upload and which you don't think is good enough. So I would start there.
Good advice. That point about doing research, I think, is so important. I mean, I get so many emails every day from companies offering me services saying that they really admire SheClicks and then going off in a tangent, which clearly says they've got no idea what SheClicks is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also kind of insulting, isn't it? Because you can tell it's just a generic email and they've subbed in a couple of words. So make sure it's really tailored. Otherwise, it doesn't come across well at all.
Absolutely. Right. Can I have your fifth number, please?
Okay, number 8.
Is there any place or animal you'd be very happy never to travel to or see again? That question's from Marie-Ange.
Oh.
So quite a flip on the rhinos.
I don't know. That's a difficult question. I don't think there's anywhere that I wouldn't go again. And I don't think there's any species that I wouldn't work with again. However, I would happily say no to the ants. When I went to Uganda to photograph the gorillas, it was absolutely incredible, and I was really careful, and I tucked my trousers into my socks and I made sure there were no gaps, and somehow these ants still got underneath all my clothing. And there is nothing worse than lining up a shot and thinking this is going to be beautiful and then getting bitten by an ant. And having to try and shake them off. So yeah, I don't think there's any locational species that I've worked with that I wouldn't work with again, but I would definitely say no to some of the creeper crawlies that come along with it.
Try and avoid the ants. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
So your final number then, please.
Number 10.
What is the most valuable piece of advice you've received in connection with your work? That question is from Liz.
I think networking, and it sounds really cliche, but it's really, really important. Whether it's conservation, photography, filmmaking, if you want to get yourself and your foot through the door, talking to people who are in that industry, getting your name out there is really important. Because if you're applying for a job or, you're wanting to go and document something, if someone's already aware of your name, then chances are they might lean more towards you than they would towards another candidate. And more importantly, just knowing what it's like and speaking to people who are already involved in that industry is really, really helpful. So I think, networking, and also to be collaborative. I think there's quite a strong lean towards competitiveness in this industry because there's so many of us trying to achieve the same things. But actually, the more we raise up other people and the more we work alongside each other, the better it is for wildlife and probably for yourself, because there might be a time where I've been approached for a project, I haven't been able to do it, I've put someone else forward, and I guarantee you that at some point in the future, that person will reciprocate and offer me a project that they can't do. So yeah, I think networking and to be collaborative rather than competitive.
Well, Lara, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. It's been really fantastic to hear from you.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been lovely to chat, Angela.
You're very welcome. Thanks for listening to this episode of the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks to everybody who sent in a question. You'll find links to Lara's website and social media channels in the show notes. I'll be back with another episode soon, so please subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform and tell all your friends and followers about it. You'll also find SheClicks on Facebook, X, Instagram and YouTube if you search for SheClicksNet. So until next time, enjoy your photography.